Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to another installment of our Reviewed and Ranked series. Today we are going over a very special character, and it's not because of their immense power, but this character is integral to anyone who is interested in speedrunning Ultimate Alliance 3. And as a holder of 3 records myself, I have really come to appreciate the usefulness of this character. And that, of course, is the legendary Nightcrawler. Now, as we jump into today's breakdown, I just want to take a brief second and remind you that I do provide daily variety content, so if you haven't done so already, make sure you subscribe to the channels. That greatly helps me out. We are less than 30 subscribers away from my sub goal of 750, where I will get a Twitter, and you will be able to interact with me more directly over there, so make sure that you fix that if you haven't done so already. And as always, if you find today's video helpful, informative, and or enjoyable, make sure you hit that like button. So Nightcrawler is, again, very, very important due to the sheer amount of speed in moving through the different levels of the game. And we'll talk a little bit more about him as we get into his base abilities and what he brings to the table. But before we really get into that, we do have to have a look at his team building significance from the team building synergies. And he actually has some very reliable synergies that you can put together on your team. Nightcrawler has 5 different synergies, 3 of which are in the strength category, those being the synergies with X-Men, Cutting Edge, and All New X-Men. He also has a Mastery synergy with Agile Fighters and a Vitality synergy with X-Force. So if you're looking to beef up the overall base damage that your team can supply, Nightcrawler's a pretty solid pick because he will allow you to optimize the strength build out of your characters, thus allowing characters to make physical contact with their foes to hit a little bit harder. And of course that Mastery synergy, if you can incorporate that into the team build as well, will help with the overall synergy damage output of your team members. Moving on to the base functions of Nightcrawler, we have his basic attack combo. And Nightcrawler's basic attack combo has 5 different hits, though hits 3 and 4 do activate on the same button press of the attack. And he does provide a little bit of a sharper lunge forward in that last hit of his combo. Of course, he does have the benefit of staggering out the smaller grunt characters as he layers his attacks into them, which is definitely going to make things a little bit easier when it comes to not being caught up in the middle of a bunch of chaos and strikes from your opponents. But that's not nearly the scope of his abilities when it comes to getting out of a pinch if he does find himself surrounded. Nightcrawler's heavy attack is a front flip, which culminates in his 2 rapier cross slash out in front of him. It has some decent coverage right there directly in front of his character, and again provides knockback to characters that don't have the stagger capability, and provides a decent amount of area of effect type damage for characters with a stagger bar, and can be used in a pinch to kind of finish out those stagger gauges when and where needed. Nightcrawler possesses an ability that we haven't seen with a whole lot of members of the cast, but his double jump is where this character really shines. As upon hitting the jump button again while in the air, Nightcrawler will teleport a little bit further in front of where he's currently at. Now, there are a few other characters on the roster that have access to this ability, such as Cable, Deadpool, and Thanos Infinite. However, between those characters, Nightcrawler's teleport is by far the fastest. He falls out of the air faster, which, as you're seeing with the demonstrative footage here, it really allows you to break through the non-combat and non-mandatory combat sections of the main playthrough area very, very efficiently. Now, the footage that I'm currently showing has its best application in the New Game Plus category. However, it does come into play once you get to the Xavier Institute, which is just before the midway point of the overall story quest. So even if you're playing in a new game category, speedrunning, you'll want to switch Nightcrawler onto your team, not only because you unlock him at level 20, which is pretty good for the new game speedruns, but it also allows you to traverse the remaining sections of that game with some elevated speed. And while you're there, just as a bonus tip, you might as well pick up Psylocke as well, because she hits very hard, but we'll break her down in our analysis next week. Moving on from Nightcrawler's double jump teleport ability, we do have his falling aerial, where he will fall straight down and plunge those rapiers down into the ground around him, having somewhat of a circular area of impact as he hits the ground, and of course dealing more damage to the opponent if you are able to land down right on top of them. The falling aerial unfortunately cannot be chained out of any of the abilities that Nightcrawler possesses. However, because you are going to be spending a significant amount of time jumping around with Nightcrawler, it will be beneficial for taking out some enemies. Particularly, it works very well against the sniper characters that are found in the Wakandan jungles, as you are able to get around those hits a little more easily without taking massive amounts of damage if they do manage to land a strike. And then you can get behind them and drop down on top of them and one-shot those characters fairly easily, and then rid yourself of having to deal with massive amounts of damage being doled out to yourself or the rest of your party. And finally, Nightcrawler's block and dodge animation. The block animation is with him crossing his rapiers out in front of him, and unfortunately characters hitting into his block don't receive any sort of rebounded damage, though I think that that would be kind of a cool mechanic if it had been included. And if you dodge out of the way instead of a roll or a jump, of course Nightcrawler is going to use that teleportation ability and blink into different areas depending on where you have faced the directional input, though the distance is fairly comparable to that of the roll distance and dodge distances of other characters that we've looked at so far. So now let's actually look at the signature abilities that Nightcrawler possesses. The first ability of his is the Swashbuckler, and this allows Nightcrawler to warp to nearby enemies and deliver a slashing attack. Though it doesn't look very impressive with the current representation that you're seeing on the screen, if you do use it in combat with other opponents, you will notice that he teleports all over the battlefield and unleashes those strikes upon unsuspecting enemies. And unfortunately, due to the rapid use of this attack, and it can be used on a mashed repeated basis, that does detract from its ability to be used as a synergy attack. So if you use this ability, it will be a standalone application, though it does have the piercing attack type, which is consistent with all of Nightcrawler's abilities. It's not the greatest in terms of damage output, unfortunately, having a C classification to damage and a C in the energy point consumption, and it's really not effective at all when it comes to attacking into opponents who have stagger gauges, as it only has the E classification to the stagger damage gauge. Consistent with all of Nightcrawler's abilities, the rank up benefits include a reduced energy point cost, an increased on the attack damage, and increased in stagger gauge damage, and a reduced chance of being interrupted. Nightcrawler's second ability is the legendary Tail, and this does have the ability to be synergized with the other members of the team, where Nightcrawler will unleash a spinning attack as he moves forward towards the opponents in the general vicinity and deals damage on all sides of the character. Of course, the most damage is going to take place on his laterals and directly in front of him, though if there is, for whatever reason, a character that rolls in behind or a mighty enemy that you move through, they will still take some damage on the backside as he moves through them. And this attack is a lot better when it comes to the damage output that this character is capable of, having a damage classification of A and a stagger classification of D, so not much better than the first ability, but overall, comparatively, it offers more damage potential, and it maintains that C classification to the energy point consumption. And this attack, as I mentioned before, has the piercing attack type and the area assault synergy trait. Nightcrawler's third ability is the Swords Dance, which is a flurry of blows type attack, where Nightcrawler will perform a series of slices in the direction that the character is facing, and you can continue to carry out this attack as you mash down on that ability or synergy button once it has been started. It has similar damage applications to the legendary Tail, having an A classification to damage, a D classification to stagger damage dealt, with that same C classification to energy points consumed. However, it doesn't have the benefit of being as mobile as the legendary tail does, so unless you are hacking and slashing into a staggered enemy or a large collection of opponents, this attack isn't going to be the overall best for this particular character. The attack maintains the piercing attack type, and it has the barrage synergy trait. The last of Nightcrawler's abilities is the Banff Strike, and Banff is the quintessential sound that is associated with Nightcrawler's teleportation as he moves around. It's very expertly demonstrated in the flavor text that appears in the comics. Anytime that Nightcrawler appears and disappears, he makes that Banff noise, and you can see that in a color text. And this is where that draws from. Now, when used in a standard setting, this ability will provide a reticle that you can move around the battlefield, and it moves a very considerable distance in the length of time before it automatically detonates. So when you're looking to get away from large conflicts, or if you find yourself on the opposite end of the battlefield and you really need to move to the other side fairly quickly, this attack can be used decently well in order to hone in on the opponents that you're needing, though it may be more worth your time to just perform a couple of double jumps and then drop down on your opponent with that falling aerial attack in terms of where you can go and how quickly you can get there. But on the damage output, it's pretty decent. It has C classifications to damage, stagger damage, and energy point consumption. Again, has that piercing attack type and has the slam synergy trait. This actually isn't a terrible ability when it comes to being used within a team synergy, as anytime it is activated within a team synergy, he will just detonate around the same area where he is currently standing, though he may adjust a little bit when unleashing that attack depending on where he is physically located in relativity to the other opponents. And finally, we have Nightcrawler's extreme attack. And this involves Nightcrawler using a series of slashes in kind of a sphere of influence, which you can see demonstrated on the screen currently. There's just kind of a big circular area where he will teleport in and out of that zone and unleash a flurry of slashing attacks on any enemies that are located within that zone. As with many other abilities that we've talked about, the caution with this is you do need to be mindful of unleashing Nightcrawler's extreme attack, as he does not course correct. He won't move or turn. But where it is a sphere of influence, you have a little bit more leeway as to what will be engulfed within that attack, as it does have a series of very efficient slashes against any opponents that are located within that area as the attack is unleashed. And it's fairly quick as well. The whole attack is over in just under a 4-second time span, so you don't really have to worry about losing out on damage against mini-boss characters or mighty enemies that have become staggered before detonating the attacks. So we've talked a lot about Nightcrawler, what he brings to the table, broken down everything that's available in his kit, so it's now time to decide where he belongs within our tier list. And from a damage output point of view, he's not great. There are certainly other characters that hit a lot harder than he does. But what really saves this character from being relegated to the lower sections of this tier list is just how fast he is. Like, you would not be able to efficiently speedrun this game if you did not have a character that moved as quickly as Nightcrawler does. This would easily be a 2.5-hour speedrun at its absolute best without Nightcrawler, whereas the current New Game Plus record that I possess stands at just under 1 hour and 40 minutes. So where does Nightcrawler belong? He belongs above C tier. If he did not move as fast as he did, I think that he would very easily fit into this area. But based off of how versatile and useful he is, in spite of his lack of damage output, I'm going to place him in B tier between Miss Marvel and Iron Fist. So let's go ahead and move these characters around so he can take his spot in that zone. I would love to see Nightcrawler be a better damage dealer, but unfortunately I don't think that that is going to be something that we realistically see. I don't think that this game's going to receive any balance patches or changes. I think version 4.0 is as much development as this particular game is going to get. But in Ultimate Alliance 4, when and if that eventually happens, there certainly is a lot of potential for this character to be overhauled a little bit and made more efficient. Hopefully that's the case, as I would hate to see him nerfed into the ground based off of how usable and how critical he is for the speedrunning aspect of this game. But what do you think? Do you think that I ranked him too low, too high? Is there any attributes about his character you feel that I missed? Be sure to let me know in the comments down below. And again, if you made it this far into the video, feel free to leave a like, as that lets me know how you are feeling about this series in particular. So thanks again for your time, and I hope that you have an absolutely fantastic rest of your day.